Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, California Weather Watch. Today is January 26th, and right now we're looking at the infrared satellite imagery. You can see the state of California, the greens and the yellows. That's subtropical and tropical air, and you see how that's being associated with this atmospheric river activity into the Pacific Northwest. It's just going to batter them up there for the next few days, potentially including some of Northwest California over the next few days also. In the meantime, high pressure, offshore winds, warming temperatures as we go through the next few days before a very potent frontal system arrives Tuesday night into Wednesday and marches all the way down across the state, ushering in a very cold air mass and a big pattern change. And I want you to watch up here across some of the North Pole and northern Alaska. This is very cold air, and I want to show you how that's going to be related to our pattern change here across California. And if you guys see some of these arc storm scenarios on social media, beware of the hype. You know, we're not looking at this right now, but it's always good to keep this in the back of your mind. Be prepared for the worst case scenario. We do have precedents for some pretty extreme flooding into the state of California. If you go back to 1861 and 62, there was some very dramatic flooding, and some of these reports cover that quite well. But, you know, take that with a grain of salt. We're not looking at that right now. Don't get caught up in some of that hype on social media. Any given year, this is less than a 2% chance that something like this would occur across the state, and it would be multiple rounds of atmospheric river activity. It wouldn't just be one giant storm that floods the entire state of anything of that nature here. So Google this, the USGS, if you want to know more. Now, in the meantime, gusty northeast winds and significant warming, gust to 50, you know, the gaps in the canyon areas into the lower 80s here for some of Southern California, quite warm all the way up into the valley areas as well. Even some of the coastal regions of Central and Northern California getting pretty warm here also. So heads up for that. Use some extra caution when driving in areas of the gusty winds. You guys know the drill. This is looking at the North American high resolution model, just kind of showing you some of these strong winds developing across the desert areas and pushing through the gaps in the canyons. The Santa Ana winds are going to be blowing for the next few days here, and this is going to continue on really into Monday with some offshore flow before we turn our eyes to that strong frontal system starting to arrive Tuesday night on into Wednesday morning. Now, looking at the daily 2-meter max temperatures here on the National Blended Models, this is for today. You can see some lower 70s, maybe getting up towards 60 for some of the Central and Northern Valley. Then we get into Saturday. Look at that warm up. Sunday, look at 72 maybe at Redding there, 70 for Sacramento, maybe up towards 80 for some of Southern California and Death Valley. Monday, another very warm day. Tuesday, still pretty warm, especially southern portions. And then as we go into Wednesday, you'll see the temperatures just rapidly drop off as that frontal system drives down across the state, ushering in a very cold air mass, and hopefully that can bring us some mountain snow through the extended forecast if we're lucky. Crossing our fingers, we'll break that down day by day. And if you want a nice affordable home weather station to record all this crazy weather, we get all solar powered, all wireless, lightning detection system, ultrasonic anemometer. It tells you when it starts raining at your house. Highly recommend that. Click on that link down below to save 10%. Now, the National Weather Service has been talking about this. If you've been watching the channel, we've been mentioning this for the last few days. We are getting better confidence in that strong frontal system arriving as we go on in through Tuesday night, Wednesday, and Thursday as it moves down the coastline. Still, some of the timing, the exact timing, of course, is going to be up in the air until we get a little bit closer to that event and the precipitation amounts as well. And just remember, the temperature in the ocean water is very warm off the coastline here, and that's really going to enhance any frontal system that moves down across the state. And that's what's happened a few times already this year. And you saw that, for example, with that San Diego and their record January rainfall there a few days ago. Now, we talked about this on the infrared satellite imagery. The very cold air here up across some of northern Alaska and across some of the North Pole. And as we put this into motion, actually, there's California there, in case you didn't know. There's Hawaii and there's Washington State. Here's the Gulf of Alaska there. So you can kind of see this cold air moving around here. You see it spilling out across the Aleutians, out into the Gulf of Alaska here. And this is what's going to continue to steer these atmospheric rivers into the Pacific Northwest, and very warm air out in front of that. And that's why we're pretty warm here also across a lot of California. But anyway, then you see the cold air start to arrive here as we go through Wednesday morning, and you can see this swoop down across the entire state. There's our frontal system. There's our pattern change. Some very cold air aloft trying to set up here across a lot of the west coast. And we could even get some further cyclogenesis on the southern periphery of this cold air that could be moving back into California here. We'll be watching that down and breaking it down. That's still a ways off into the forecast right now. And looking at the European as of yesterday afternoon here, we're at about Monday morning of next week. I want to kind of highlight here this frontal system out there. You can see it on the GFS and the European. If we scroll off into very early Tuesday morning, you'll see this parent low out here, 973, 970 millibar low, very strong storm system here. And this is what's going to usher in that very cold air mass. And you can see the associated frontal system. The European is faster and just bringing some ridiculous rainfall amounts in a 6-hour period. A very potent frontal system. And again, the GFS is slower, but it has been trending stronger with this frontal system as well. And look at some of these amounts down across Southern California as this thing just blasts all the way down through Baja California. Very chilly air mass ushered in, and then we could get some additional storm development on the southern periphery. That through the extended, plenty of time to worry about that as we go. Hopefully we can build some mountain snows as this colder air drops down towards next weekend as well. Now, looking at the sea surface temperature anomaly off the coastline, this is giving the frontal systems a little bit of a punch. You can imagine that water vapor and the very warm temperature, and you bring the very cold air aloft over that. You bring that very strong gradient and that clash of air masses. So you can really enhance some of the convective available potential energy with some of these frontal systems. You can bring thunderstorm activity and some very locally intense rainfall amounts in a short period of time. Now, keeping that in mind with just how warm the water is off the coastline, if I put this into motion, you see the warm air being pumped into the Pacific Northwest, atmospheric river activity, and then we see our colder air start to arrive here as we go through about Tuesday afternoon. There you'll be able to see that frontal system off the coastline. It's going to look pretty ominous on the infrared satellite imagery as well. Then it starts to arrive as we go through the day Wednesday and really blasting down across the state. So imagine that very warm ocean out there with the very cold air aloft. Big clash there, and potent frontal system is likely as we go on in through next week. And then again, we could have additional storm development on the southern periphery of that cold air as we go on in towards next weekend. But we're going to worry about that later. I just bring it up because once you bring a frontal system that strong across the area, if you bring in additional heavy rainfall, you could really start setting up for some interesting flooding events here across the state. We'll worry about that here as we go off into the future there in the upcoming days, though. Now, this is looking at the Canadian model as well. You can see the atmospheric rivers just pouring into the Pacific Northwest. And something of note is it should be including some portions in Northwest California also. So, you know, we might be setting the stage for some flooding across Northern California as well as this frontal system just burrows in here as we go on in through. This is actually, you know, Tuesday evening right there, and then we're going into Wednesday morning here. Look at some of these ridiculous totals showing up on the Canadian model. Just a very robust frontal system. Big rains across the Bay Area, the Central Coast, all the way down across Southern California here as that cold air mass gets ushered in, and then hopefully we can build some snow as we go to the later portion of next week. The snow levels are really going to crash across the state, and then we got additional storm development after that as well. We got to watch out for that closely for flooding potential. So here we're looking at the national blended models. This is hot off the presses here, 15Z that started running at about 7 a.m. here Pacific Standard Time. This is total precipitation in inches, and I'm going to put this into motion, just kind of showing you that before the big frontal system even arrives, some pretty healthy amounts across some of Northern California as well. And then we're going to have that big frontal system start rolling in here as we go through Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So some pretty impressive amounts showing up across Northwest California, but you can also see how this just kind of falls fast and furious all the way down through Southern California. By the time we get in towards Friday afternoon, that'll be wrapping up. And that colder air mass is going to be probably in place, but there's still additional storm development chances as we scroll off into the 10-day period. We'll worry about that later. But we could be having some interesting flooding concerns, some urban and small stream flooding with the hot and heavy, fast and furious arrival of that frontal system as we go through Wednesday and Thursday. Now, looking at the 10th percentile here on the European ensemble members. So this is actually probably one of the best case scenarios as far as precipitation, and still some pretty heavy amounts all the way from Northern California down towards Southern California here, looking about 10 days out. If we look at the 50th percentile here, this is probably closer to actually what's going to happen. And again, a lot of this is going to fall fast and furious with that frontal system as we go through Wednesday into Thursday. And if we look at worst case scenario here, the 90th percentile, you can see the pretty robust precipitation amounts across much of the state as we go on in towards Sunday afternoon. Now we can look at that for individual locations as well. This is Los Angeles International Airport. The green line here is the ensemble mean. So there's 50 members, and these are averaged out, and these dashes are kind of the extreme ensemble members. The 90th percentile and the 10th percentile fall within this blue bar here. The blue line here is the deterministic or the control run. So this is basically the initial conditions best we understand them. The ensemble members all have their initial conditions tweaked a little bit to try to correct for any of our errors. So hopefully it's a little ensemble 101 for you. Hopefully that makes sense. And this is looking up towards Crescent City. You can see better agreement up there between the actual ensemble mean and the control run. And again, this blue bar marks the 90th percentile and the 10th percentile of probability. Now, this is looking at San Francisco International Airport, and again, with the control run or the deterministic actually showing a lesser amounts than even the 10th percentile of the ensemble members there. So if it starts trending towards the ensemble mean more, we'll start to expect more precipitation out of that. But you can still see we have some of that disagreement here. The wider these bars are, the bigger the disagreement we have between the 90th percentile. In a better forecast, you know, these bars will start getting smaller here, and we'll have better confidence of just what exactly is going to occur. Looking at total snow in inches on the National Blended Models as well. Let's scroll through this. Snow levels are going to be quite high as we move into the early portion of next week. But when that frontal system moves down across the area, snow levels are going to crash with it. So we could be looking at a snowy period coming up here for some of the higher terrain if we're lucky. Cross our fingers here. And it depends on the path of that cold air for the most part. And you can see some snow starting to fly across even some of Southern California. And by the time we go in towards what? The following Tuesday morning there, we're looking at over 10 plus days out there. But cross your fingers that we can start to build some snow across the Sierra Nevada. We're only about the 25th percentile for snow water equivalent, so we definitely need it. Now, I want to show you this as well. This is 5,000 feet. We're looking at streamlines and temperature anomaly. The state of California is here. You can see the very warm air associated with that southwest subtropical flow, atmospheric rivers into the Pacific Northwest. You can see this continues on all the way into Tuesday. The snow levels are going to be quite high. We're going to be melting some of that snow that we have in place across some of the higher terrain. But then that air mass change comes and the big pattern change as we roll on in towards the end of the week here. So hopefully this materializes. We just got to watch for some additional storm development on the southern periphery of that. But for the most part, this is a nice signal for mountain snow building as we go on in through early February. Cross your fingers with that. We'll watch that and break it down day by day. Here's the 6 to 10 day temperature probability outlook. Much of the USA is included. And this is just now starting to enter the time frame where we get that colder air starting to move into the West Coast. And you can clearly see it in the 8 to 14 day as we go through February 8th. You know, we're looking at good chance of some below average temperature here across much of the West Coast. 6 to 10 day precipitation. As you can see, we're bullseyed here across much of California, and 8 to 14 day continuing to see the above average across California and a lot of the Southwest. This is looking at the snow water equivalent. We've actually been kind of making a comeback here a bit. We're still right around the 25th percentile. We need to get up towards normal here. So we're probably going to be melting some of that snow initially, but then maybe we can start to build that back here as we go on in towards the following weekend upcoming here, you know, the 10-day time period there. Drought monitor here. I showed this yesterday as well. This has been updated as of yesterday, and no drought across the state of California right now. Remember this because it's not always going to be like that. But anyway, yeah, so we are gaining some confidence. All the models are showing that strong frontal system, the big pattern change incoming here. But again, the models are probably going to change, of course, at that time range. And, you know, additional storms that follow after that frontal system will be changing and flip-flopping and going back and forth as well. So enjoy that warm temperature in the meantime here across much of the state of California. There's offshore winds and some nice warm air is going to be present with us until we get that big pattern change upcoming here. And yeah, so we'll continue to break this down day by day. And as it gets closer, I'll probably do a live stream or maybe a couple of videos a day. And once we get better a model agreement on the exact timing of it, we can better communicate just the exact risks that we have with that frontal system moving down the state. But anyway, looks like an active period is still incoming. So again, enjoy that weather in the meantime. And hope you guys are liking these videos. Click like and subscribe. We'll do this again tomorrow, and I will talk to you guys then.